Yet another week of attackers riding in on things that are already trusted. But this week, it is a little harder to ignore. Legitimate tools used to manipulate industrial systems, active sessions taken over without logging in, and browser extensions operating with full access. We even had a $10 domain that could have reached 25,000 machines. We've been talking about this shift for a while, and at this point, it's kind of hard to consider it a trend. It's just kind of the way things work now. There's no initial access moment. It's just abusing trust like that, things that are already there. I'm joined this week to talk about this by managing senior consultant Chad Malloy, managing senior consultant Liam Somerville, and senior security consultant Thomas Wilson. Thanks for joining.
Hey, hey.
And I want to start this week with a story from Bleeping Computer. Basically, a info stealer called Silent Storm bypasses traditional credential theft by hijacking active user sessions and decrypting sensitive data server side. Instead of logging in, they are just stepping into authenticated environments and operating as a user would without triggering any kind of controls. So, how does risk change when attackers don't need any kind of credentials anymore? They just need a session.
I mean, I have thoughts on this one. This is sort of what social engineering campaigns kind of like will angle for a lot. I feel like on like somebody's computer, right? Like if you're targeting a user at some company and you want to get into their company, but maybe they're not on a VPN. One of the things you might do is get into their browser session and steal all their tokens. You don't need to worry about any stored passwords they might have, although you might get that, right? But like all sorts of techniques have existed for a while to say evade app-bound encryption. Maybe you copy the Chrome directory somewhere else on disk that you can start things up with the debugger, so you can just go in there, pull the credentials out. I think they're doing something similar here. There was mention in the article about pulling things off and decrypting them server side. I don't think that was with app-bound encryption active. I'm not sure exactly what that technique was, but there was some mention of like, oh, we're still doing this on the user's device. We're dumping all this stuff and then we're pulling it off and then, signing it in somehow. I think that's pretty typical, but they have a really neat user interface, which looks nice and certainly would make this a lot easier to manage at scale.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead, Chad.
Go ahead.
I think this is. I mean, this is just another flavor of like attackers in your computer is a bad thing, right? Like if you have an XSS vulnerability, the issue isn't that like they were able to do things as an administrator. The issue is that they were able to bypass same origin policy, right? Like so that's the thing you want to address is like if an attacker's on my computer, there's all sorts of stuff they can do. There's all sorts of bad things there. I mean, ideally, maybe you do what you can to minimize that, but the problem is that they're on your computer in the first place.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to kind of follow on with what Thomas had said, where it's basically a service now. You go on a forum and you can basically purchase this info stealer, I guess, kind of wrap your own stuff around it. And I know we're not supposed to say this, but there's good tradecraft out there on both sides. And I feel like this, malware as a service, info stealer as a service, like I'm going to admit it, those guys are probably better developers than me. I saw the same like interface and I was like, man, I would write something like that if I knew how. So
Yeah.
like you're doing it at scale and you basically have a support desk if you call if it doesn't work correctly. I mean that's like bad for other people, but like it's a business model.
It's
Yeah.
kind of interesting too, because like they're going after stuff that's not even necessarily like business too. Because I think in there they were like, oh, they're also grabbing like Telegram, Signal, and Discord, which is really odd, right? Like it makes it seem like, oh, these are people who are really online, right? Like they're not necessarily going after businesses. They're going after individuals who might just happen to have a bunch of money, like with the crypto wallets and stuff, or like individuals who have authority or a credit card stored somewhere that they can launder money through. Like, seems like this is just, they'll steal any information from a computer with this stuff.
If it's working. Yeah.
Yeah.
I say I do those smash and grabs when I get access on an internal network. I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is, but you know what I'm taking? Everything.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out later. So
Harvest now, decrypt later. When we get our supercomputers, we don't even need to worry about the encryption, right?
Yeah. So where do we think like traditional security fails when it's applied to systems like this that were never really designed to be secure?
I mean, Microsoft is really good at sort of being resilient against credential stealing like this, or not credential stealing, but like session stealing. Because if you steal a session for Entra or like Azure or what have you, and then you try to log in from with that same token from another IP
Shoot.
address.
So do we think that like there are certain blind spots that emerge when security programs are kind of anchored around authentication rather than this like post auth behavior?
I mean, I think enterprises probably do a little bit better job of this, because they have more visibility, and then there's also like enterprise level like browsers, like you could use. I think Island. I've used Island at other companies before, and I think for this is like either small, medium businesses or like, my mom would like definitely not catch this. Like the problem is partially like an EDR solution, like a network profiling solution. Like is Liam's account doing weird things that Liam doesn't normally do? But you need tooling and bodies around that. So
Um, I want to talk also about this from Ars Technica. Iran linked hackers disrupt operations at U.S. critical infrastructure sites. Basically, Iran linked actors are targeting these sites by exploiting industrial control systems, not to steal data, but to manipulate real world processes. These environments were not designed with any kind of security assumptions, which means when they get access, there's usually very little separation between presence and actual disruption. Uh, how should organizations be thinking about risk when the goal isn't actually data theft, but it's just disruption?
Yeah, I think ICS
Certainly,
is
yeah.
an interesting case, and I think they've been getting better with security for a while. I think the trick is just that a lot of these systems are built to be there for 20, 30 years, right? And if you have like a Windows XP workstation there, on one hand, it's a Windows XP workstation. On the other hand, it's a key piece of industrial equipment that gets turned off once every 2 years. So how do you keep that up to date? That said, I mean, I think they are getting better. I don't think that access does, um, it is the be all and end all. I think when you have access to one of those networks, there are a lot of very fragile systems on there. You can disrupt fairly easily, but there's a big change between disruption and like a targeted ICS attack, right? Because you can like knock a PLC offline or knock um, a device offline doesn't necessarily mean you're having that full impact. And a good example here is like what they did at Stuxnet, right? So if you haven't read Countdown to Zero Day, and it's been a minute for me, it's well worth it. But they didn't just go in like, okay, cool, we're gonna like knock the PLCs offline, and that's gonna be our thing. You can buy a new PLC, you can fix it, you can reflash the firmware, all this other stuff. What they did is they actually targeted the centrifuges, right? They knew it was there. They specifically targeted the process in place, and they had an attack that does that. So if you're looking at, critical infrastructure, you're talking about, I want to blow something up, I want to open a dam, I want to dump a tank, I want to do something to actually target the specific plant you're in. That's a lot different, right? And a lot of times you're going to be competing with safety systems and redundancy and all this other stuff. So there is a meaningful, from what I understand, like right now, like mostly it's disruption, which is the low hanging fruit. If you want to get into the real nation state level things where you're causing significant impacts, that's a bit different. And I think one of the other things is that the threat model for ICS is a lot different than what it would be for, a payment card vendor, right? Where it's like, get in, get the card, get out, use the cards. With ICS and like critical infrastructure, like there's no point in like attacking a power plant in the middle of in the middle of peacetime when you don't have a need, right? You're gonna get in, you're gonna get it persistence, and you're gonna sit there and wait, and you're gonna use it at an advantageous time, right?
Yeah.
So it's a great, I think it's a great way of like asymmetric attack. The U.S. is disproportionately exposed to like online attacks, but yeah, I don't. I think as like conventional war and conventional tensions build up, I think you're going to see more of this because that's when you actually want to use them when it's going to have the greatest impact.
Yeah, I think one thing that's kind of crazy too, like I can't remember a time where Iran deployed like known malware against the United States. Like politically, this is interesting because like Stuxnet, for example, that was us, like the U.S. Targeting Iran, their nuclear program, and like the government got past their air gap because that system was obviously more hardened than a traditional ICS system would be. If they're just targeting arbitrary ICS systems across the United States, a lot of those places don't have, ironically, like they're not going to be as hardened, and maybe disruption could just be the goal, right? Because
Yeah.
if there's an active war happening and one of the parties in that war is just disrupting things, that can be a great smokescreen for other actual, bigger activities or just pressure, right? So there's a lot of political implications that I'm certainly not qualified to opine on.
Chad is. Let's hear it, Chad.
I'm going to opine slightly differently. We were doing an industrial control test, one of my consultants and I this week, and I'm going to plug a little bit of AI and a little bit of research that we did. We fed it like the protocol specification into an AI, and we're like, here's this terrible fuzzer that Chad wrote, and it was like, oh my god, why did you even try? Also, you missed all of these test cases, and we built out a fuzzer, and maybe it was a day, and it was way better than the trash that I gave it. And we it was good enough that we wrote some research around it, and we're like, here's a full protocol fuzzler, and it does a lot of wild stuff. And here's all the like just general bad things that we found because it's an industrial control system. It's not designed to be hooked to the internet, so it's like it has some of these features, but not turned on by default. And I used to be an industrial controls guy back when yours still started with one. And if you ever want to just see craziness, just run Nmap against an industrial control network, because a lot of those do not know how to handle like improperly formatted packets. And it'll be like, oh, so that bit is set to 1. I'll turn this thing on. I don't care. so, so it's a scary place. It's a, like Liam was saying, it's a fragile, scary place to have people. So
Yeah, when we were doing pen tests, generally when we got to level 3, which is if you go by the Purdue model, it's been a minute. Level 4 is like the business network, 3.5 through DMZ, and then 3, 2, 1 are kind of where your process control lives. I mean, if we got to level 3, we stopped. Like we didn't touch anything, we didn't do anything, because at that point you're screwed. I've personally knocked devices offline with a ping. I've had another one of our consultants. Not this company, a couple of companies ago, a client wanted them to run Nmap. He's like, I don't think it's a good idea. I said, no, please do it. And he dumped a tank. So they are incredibly fragile. They're not built. You'll have something that's listening on TCP/80 that is not an HTTP service, doesn't expect HTTP, and actually doesn't know how to handle stuff that's not HTTP. So it's a pretty wild state. But again, this is like random effects, right? It's like you're not specifically saying, oh, this is a tank I'm going to dump. You're like, I accidentally dumped this because I ran Nmap. So if you're trying to target the process specifically for maximum impact, that's when you start to have that specialized knowledge of. I mean, if you read about Stuxnet, like they built a replica of what they thought it looked like in the U.S. and then tuned their payloads accordingly. So that tells you kind of how well you need to understand what you're attacking, and like that's harder to get. Like that level of expertise and understanding is harder to get. You can't just get that because it's something's connected to the internet. It takes a lot more time.
I feel like the stuff running on port 80, that's not a web service, it makes me so mad. We've had standards for as long as these ICS systems have existed. Why can't we just follow the protocol standards?
Well, they were never connected to anything, right? Like you could do whatever you want in your little kingdom because it's like you're in a physical plant. The network's there, but there's nothing outside of it. You're never going to connect to anything. So,
right.
Who cares?
Well, also this week from the Hacker News, we have 108 malicious Chrome extensions steal Google and Telegram data, affecting 20,000 users. Researchers uncovered these extensions tied to a shared command and control infrastructure capable of stealing data and injecting arbitrary code into every page a user visits. These extensions operate inside a layer organizations rely on, but do not control. So, how should organizations be thinking about risk in such environments that they have little to no control over, like a browser extension.
I would say get the big three and make sure that those are managed by the organization to prevent the installation of any extensions, period. Like Firefox, Chrome, Edge. I feel like those are the ones that I see the most, or like any Chromium derivative is maybe like manageable in the same way. Just don't let users install extensions unless they're like pre-approved in a store.
Yeah, and I think, if a single user can completely undermine the security of your organization, like there's some fragility in your security program.
Yeah, like the way to do this is like Liam was saying is like administrative controls. Like, hey, we know what's in here, and you can only install from our store. And then also, like, would I let my mom have access to this? Like, would I just let my mom install random programs on her computer? And my mom does not have admin access on her computer for that reason. And it's, like I feel like it's just kind of a why. It's not even new. It's just like we as bad guys figured out an unmanaged place to get into the network, and we figured out how to get a hold, either purchase or find abandoned extensions, and they took advantage of it. And if they close this one off, they'll find the next one. So
Also, talk about a great delivery system for something like the first story that we were talking about, where it's like you want to get inside a browser. You don't even need to do outbound encryption workarounds if you already have an extension running inside a browser that can manage your data on all sites, right? Like, which is commonly a thing that an extension will ask you, like, hey, can I manage literally everything for you? And users being users will be like, that
Click
sounds
one
fine.
time. Yeah.
Just want this thing to work. And it's like, okay, cool. All of your
just show me the
passwords and
pictures of the
tokens are,
cats. I'm just here for
yeah,
the.
show me the
Yeah, sure.
cats, man.
Track me. Fine. I need my cat pic.
Yeah.
I also love how we've gone from Shad always talking about would an intern get these privileges to would my mom get these privileges as a rating system of just how scary it is.
Okay, everyone who has a mom has opened up their browser to fix some problem, and they have 63 toolbars running, and like some weird random homepage. Like, how did you even do this?
Where are we?
Please. I have 63 toolbars running. Let's not get carried away.
All right. We also have from Security Week $10 domain could have handed hackers 25,000 endpoints, including in OT and gov networks. This is a single unregistered domain available for approximately $10. I don't know the exact amount, but could have allowed attackers to take control of all these endpoints due to lingering connections from an adware infected system or from adware infected systems. No exploit, just claiming something that was left behind, forgotten. Um, what does this kind of low cost, high impact exposure say about how we're kind of measuring risk?
I mean, I don't know if they said it explicitly in the article. This sounded like a CNAME takeover, which is basically like, oh, we've got some domain name record that points to another uh domain somewhere, and it's just like an alias basically used right by a company, and they just they're no longer managing that domain, and it's just like, cool, now that can point that to something else that is malicious. And this is like, classic. Like so many industries and so many businesses in a wide variety of industries have the problem of, oh, we don't know all of the domains that we manage, and it's hard to do that. And one of the easiest ways to find that you've got a problem there is to just do the scanning yourself, like run through all of the records that exist for your domain, constantly be scanning subdomains or domains that you think you may own, like having managed inventories of what those domains are. But it's difficult, right? Like, this is hard for anybody. And I think it's just, if you've got critical functionality based on one domain, you want to make sure you don't let that domain lapse.
It's a very similar attack to this. Purchased an expired domain, and I used it slightly differently because I just created a catch-all email address, and and you go to register it, and it'll say, "Do you want to create one email address where every email will go if it's not registered?" And I was like, "Sure." And you can just watch all of this business data start rolling in. So I mean, there's for $10 and the cost of storage, like you can lose a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And finally, this is my favorite story of the week. We've talked a lot about AI lately and about the realities and the hype and the advance of capabilities. But from New York Magazine, is the AI cybersecurity apocalypse already here? Now, the title, granted, yeah, there's some hype there.
If there's ever
But
an article where it asks a question, right, the answer is no. That's
is
what I've
this
been
the
taught.
apocalypse? Oh, goodness. OpenAI is expanding controlled access to advanced capabilities through GPT-5 for cyber, signaling a shift toward restricting who can use powerful vulnerability discovery and exploit tools. The capability is no longer theoretical. We have arrived. Skynet has become self-aware. This is a real thing. Um, we've talked about this. Shad, you joined me recently to kind of do a bit of a roundtable on this. Um, but capability isn't the constraint anymore. So, like, how meaningful is trusted access as a control boundary? What does that look like?
I think one of the things we discussed on that round table was I'm not a marketing person, but if I really wanted to hype up my product, I would start by saying this thing is so dangerous. We're only letting the cool kids play with it. I'm not saying that like it's basically the clickbait article, but that's what I would do, and it is great. I will say, right now at Bishop Fox, I know they're doing 2 responsible disclosures for like 0 days that people found, using AI. So it's a real thing, and it definitely like lets somebody like me who is moderately skilled at that, operate on Thomas's and Liam's level. Like it is definitely a force multiplier that can do crazy stuff. So I believe the term that we used was it's weaponized RTFM, right? Like it's read all the manuals, it knows what to do. So
Yeah, I don't know. I think AI is just another example of a dual use technology, right? And like in InfoSec, we've had these arguments for a really long time. We've had these arguments about Metasploit. We've had these arguments about Sliver. And it's like, well, what if the bad guys get it? It's like, well, if the bad guys have it, sure, but like if the good guys have it, then they can help. And I think the difference with, something like Metasploit and Sliver is like, okay, now like pen testers have an easier time pen testing, which is useful, right? I mean, if you have a pen tester who can move faster and like make more efficient use of the time, you get better results as someone who's hiring pen testers. But I think the tricky thing with LLMs is that, they're more broadly applicable. So it does help attackers. It does help, and it does help pen testers, but it also helps like developers writing code, right? If you have a fantastically strong model that's, read all the manuals on, secure code, and you have that in your IDE as you're writing insecure code, it's like, whoa, 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 take your hand off the foot gun. That's meaningful as well, right? So I think this is just another example of dual use technologies, and I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical about the trusted access. I feel like that's going to leak anyways. I think as an organization, if you're relying on trusted access to save you from powerful LLMs, like you're probably relying on the wrong thing. I'm generally in favor of, you know, let dual use technologies out and, make sure that you're aware of what's out there. Because if you're writing code in 2026 and you're not making use of LLMs that understand what insecure code looks like, you're probably leaving something on the table.
Yeah, 100%. And like I kind of even like think that the trusted access thing, I kind of agree with Chad. This like might be marketing hype a little bit, like, oh, we're closing this off. Like, we're only gonna let a few people use this, when it's like, obviously LLMs are powerful. Obviously, they're really good at finding vulnerabilities. They need a guiding hand in a lot of cases, but the argument here is like, oh, this is fully autonomous, you can do all this stuff. And it's like, okay, like let's look at, like, I think like Marcus Hutchins was like talking about this on Twitter, but like let's look at what the breakdown of vulnerabilities they found. A lot of it is memory management vulnerabilities that are bad, but not typically exposed in the way that might be exploitable. So like the game isn't changing in terms of like what's being found by Mythos specifically right now. And like, obviously it's big, right? It's big news. It's just not necessarily like, oh, all of the authentication vulns that exist out there on the internet tomorrow are going to be exploited autonomously by an AI, right? Like, same as always, like Liam, you're saying, it's like we got to apply this tool to our technology as we build it, because other people will apply it to the technologies after it's built.
The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah. And I think for every, 0 day that makes the news, some developer's going to patch 73 issues in their own code. And we'll just never hear about that. So it could be almost
Right.
just like we only hear about the successes on one side. So
Yeah. Uh, how do we feel? I know, Shed, you had mentioned before kind of the distinction between the advantages that this gives attackers versus the advantages that this gives defenders, um, and that might not be paired fairly right now. How do you see that timeline? Do you think defenders are going to kind of catch up to what attackers are currently doing?
oh, absolutely. I think if you're, considering it like a race, uh, I think pen testers and hackers are probably early adopters of this, and they're just willing to get weird compared to like the defenders probably have a change control process. They are working slower, but like kind of like Liam said, we've had this discussion for years, and the defenders will catch up. Almost everyone I know who's doing like kind of SOC work right now is they're like, yeah, we don't have any level one SOC people anymore. What level one SOC is all AI, and we have basically everyone comes in as a level two SOC analyst, and we're just handling escalations. And like you can't beat that speed, right? Like as an attacker, if you're using AI and they're using AI to do a pattern recognize you, and that's what it's really good at. Like, I think I think it's kind of asymmetric right now, and attackers are winning, but like defenders will get better. Also because defenders have more money. Like
Oh, that's
I don't know
true.
if you know what the cost of like some of those like logging systems are, but if you are spending 6 or 7 figures and you say I would like AI to do this thing, like they can make it do that. They have money to throw at the problem.
Chad, you gave me a really good idea talking about SOCs using escalations all through AI. Because if that's happening, very funny potential prompt injection vector just by naming your file at something that you want the AI to process, like additional instructions, like for LLMs, like do this with this escalation.
When I was younger and dumber, I should say, I was using Snort and I figured out like, oh, I can block this guy doing this thing. And he was like, oh, I see what you're doing. And he basically spoofed traffic and had me knock my own network offline. So
That's
it's
awesome.
it's just gonna move to a different thing. Like sometimes attackers are just more creative, and if you're willing to break things, like you can be like, I wonder what would happen if I had it ingest all of my code. Like
Yeah. Also, like
yeah,
using a big model, like having an attack surface that has prompt injection tricks is something that you can do as well, right? Like, I don't know how much people are talking about that on blue teams. I'm not so much inside baseball on that side, right? But like, if you've got a big automated scanner that's an LLM that has some level of ethics programmed into it or behavioral stuff that as it interprets things that it's processing, it might change its behavior, which I think all of them just do. You can't avoid that. You could easily have honeypots that are designed around mass scanning that's triaged purely by AI agents. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can do in this space that I feel like, people are probably already doing and just not talking about as much because it doesn't surface. It doesn't come to the surface as much as, oh, we found a bunch of 0 days.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's easy to overlook is, if you're a small dev team, you probably don't have a dedicated security engineer, right? And
Mhm.
attackers are always attacking, and there's been, the capabilities are always improving, and there's that steady increase that we've seen where everyone just keeps upping their game. But like if you're a team of 4 or 5 people and you're all focused on, building the thing that makes you money, you probably don't have a security engineer on your team. And maybe you get a pen test like once a year, and maybe they say, hey, your foot guns all over the place, but likely you don't. And if you have something that can sit in your browser or sit in your IDE and tell you, hey, this is dangerous, this is dangerous, this is why, and you can thoughtfully apply those recommendations, like that's pretty meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just about users having like developers having to know that they can do that, right? Because like if you just ask an app, if you just ask Claude to make you a thing, it might potentially put your password in some JavaScript files as a hard-coded variable, right? But like if you know, hey, as I'm pair programming with Claude or whatever, can you make sure the things are like there's probably design patterns that are coming out around that too that make things a lot easier. But yeah, it's always easier if you have an actual security team, you know?
And I think also going on with what Liam says, let's say I've moved on to, my new super cool app and it comes up and it's like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but you always code this thing in an insecure way. And you're like, hey, I have all of these other repos that I probably coded in an insecure way. Can you go fix those too? So, like, nobody's getting hours to go back and fix that 5-year-old code. But if you spend some tokens, you can like uplift security everywhere. And that's one of those things you'll never hear anybody talk about it because it's the shame. Some dev has a shame, and like he's just gonna fix it quietly in the background.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to put a pin in it here. If you are curious about this kind of AI apocalypse, I'm doing air quotes on that word. We did a recent roundtable on that. You can find that on our site, bishopfox.com/resources. As always, thank you, gentlemen, for stopping by and sharing your insight.
Thank
Happy to
you.
be here.
Good talking to you.
And if you find this useful, please feel free to share it with anyone on your team who could benefit from it. Till next week, stay safe.